Welcome to the Johnson County Public Policy Council Forum for Overland Park City Council Ward 4. I'm Reagan Cussimanio, co-chair of the Overland Park Chamber's Public Policy and Advocacy Committee, and I'd like to welcome you. For the next 60 minutes, we'll have an opportunity to hear from the candidates about the issues important to the business community and the community at large. To start, let me introduce and welcome our candidates for Ward 4. First, we have Ty Gardner, Stacie Gram, and Scott Mosher. Our format will be as follows. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Candidates will then have 2 minutes each to respond to questions prepared by the Policy Council, and then we'll conclude with a 2-minute closing statement. So prior to starting, the order of speaking was drawn at random, and we will start our opening statement with Mr. Moser.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Mosher, and I'm one of the candidates of 3 candidates for Ward 4 in Overland Park for the City Council. A little bit about my background. I started off in life working for McDonald's Corporation. Believe it or not, I actually cleaned the store overnight, and that's where I started. I was also a reserve policeman at the same time in North Las Vegas and Henderson, where I spent almost 13 and a half years on the street. I transferred out in 1989 with McDonald's Corporation. I actually worked in Arkansas, but lived in Kansas, so did a lot of traveling. They transferred me out as a business consultant, where I was over about 83 stores down in Arkansas, making sure that franchisees in the company were able to work in harmony with one another. After that, I continued my career with McDonald's, left them after 27 years as the Director of Leadership Development. I was a regional training manager. I also was able to run a $60 million business, 26 restaurants with over 800 employees, and was one of the best in the country with my market. After I moved to Overland Park in order to watch my granddaughter, for my son Michael, who was a police officer in Overland Park, we moved next door to them at 124th and Quivira in order to watch him, since he worked the midnight shift and his wife was working and traveling. After my son died, my wife and I stayed there in Overland Park, and our roots are now here in Overland Park, and they're actually tied here forever, where my son and my wife are buried next to each other at Johnson County Memorial. Overland Park has become my city and has become the place where I plan to retire. And as a city councilman, I plan on only working basically 4 years. And then at that point, I will turn it over to some other competent people.
All right, next we will have Mr. Gardner.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to those watching online. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting. And very special thank you, as I look straight into the camera, to my mother-in-law, who is picking up my 5-month-old son from daycare today, and she's going to be watching this online. So trying to score some brownie points. Thank you to Pam and all grandmas out there. My name's Ty Gardner. I am a husband to my wife, Sarah, father to our 5-month-old son, Andrew. My professional background is in the business and law world, and I'm running for City Council in Overland Park in Ward 4. I'm running for a few reasons, but the overarching theme is to connect the success this city's had over the last 20 years to what we still need to accomplish in the next 20. So that's a cute little tagline, but what does it actually mean? It means first and foremost, we need to protect what makes Overland Park great today. So these are the issues that keep landing us on these best places to live in America lists. Things like our safety, things like our infrastructure and being welcoming to business. But also, as we're protecting what makes us great today, we need to build towards what's going to land us on those lists tomorrow. So these are things like becoming regional leaders in sustainability and the treatment of mental health, taking diversity and inclusion measures seriously. And it's about our values. It's about valuing transparency and accountability at all times, not just when we're running for office. It's about respecting opinions, especially when we disagree with people. It is a fact that one chapter of Overland Park's history is closing. This year, we're going to have a new mayor for the first time in 16 years. And as we make that kind of a change, it's a perfect opportunity for us to consider what other perspectives are right to lead our city into this next chapter. Do we want to raise expectations for local leadership, or keep expectations the same? Are we satisfied with the level of transparency and accountability we see out of current leadership, or do we think we deserve more? Do we value new perspectives, or is the status quo good enough for our future? We have an opportunity in this election to help write that next chapter, and I hope you'll join me by voting for me on August 3rd or before August 3rd.
Next, we have Ms. Stacie Gram.
Thank you so much, and thank you for hosting me as well. I really appreciate that. So I've said often in the past few months of campaigning that my roots are deep in Overland Park. And I really mean that I have a passion for the city and a love for the city. I grew up here. My parents still live in the house I was raised in. I graduated from Shawnee Mission South High School. And when my husband Peter and I got married 30 years ago, we decided that we would raise our two amazing kids here. Both of them have now graduated from Blue Valley Northwest High School. One has started college and one has just graduated from college. And we are both really hoping that they return to Overland Park and make this their home as well. Over the years, I have volunteered in many different aspects of our community. Before I had kids, I started out as a CASA volunteer. I worked with low-income single mothers in Overland Park. And then when I had kids, I started volunteering in their schools, and I volunteered all the way through graduation. I'm also a person who has worked and had my career in Overland Park for more than 20 years. I'm an attorney, I'm an insurance professional, and I have worked in insurance companies based right here in Overland Park for that entire time. I'm now a vice president at CNA Insurance. I manage teams of professionals that themselves manage litigation all over the country. I think that gives me a really unique view on Overland Park. As a person who has raised their family here, as a person who has worked here, as a person who has served here. A little over a year ago, we had a vacancy in Ward 4 on the City Council, and I applied to fill that vacancy. I was so privileged to be chosen to do that. I have looked back during this campaign and wondered, why the heck did I decide to do that just when a pandemic was breaking out? And the reason is because I wanted to give back to the city that has given so much to me and my family. I appreciate what we have done to build this city to where it is now, but I also know that we can improve and we can do better. We can make this city great for my kids who want to come back and live here and are looking for different things that I'm looking for. And a city that is great for my parents who are aging in Overland Park and have different needs. There are ways we can improve the city and build on our strength, and we'll talk about some of those tonight. But as you look at my history, I think you'll see my skill set, building and moving forward, bringing people together and doing a lot of listening. I'm proud of what I have done and would love to do it for 4 more years.
Thank you. We'll move on to our first set of questions, and we will start with Ty Gardner. Question number 1, a 1 mil property tax levy increase to fund the recommendations of the Mental Health Task Force has been proposed for 2022. Do you support the task force recommendations? Do you support increasing the mill levy for this purpose? And discuss why or why not, and how you would fund the recommendations if you support them, but not the mill levy increase.
Sure. All right, so thank you for the question. Do I support the Mental Health Task Force and the mill levy raise to fund mental health task force? Yes and yes, and I think we need to do so much more. So I think it's important to look at mental health through 2 lenses. I think that's what is possible today with the current electorate and the current political will that exists today, and what could be possible if we invest in the future. So we all claim to have, big, bold ideas on mental health, and we want to see big things take place. But they don't take place. And why don't they take place? Because the current political will just is not there amongst people who are actually voting. So that leaves our leaders with a couple of options. We can either change minds or we can expand the voter base, and I propose that we do both. When it comes to changing minds, I think we need to expand how we think about mental health. We need to acknowledge that mental health is not just a public health issue, but it's a housing issue. If you are spending a whole lot of your income on your mortgage or on your rent, that's going to have negative implications on your mental health. It is an education issue, especially in a post-COVID world where our kids are going to be dealing with the effects of distanced and masked learning for years to come. It's a public safety issue, and it's so much more. So we need to have leadership that expands how we think about mental health. But we also need to work on expanding that voter base, because as you look at my generation, taking mental health seriously is wildly popular amongst this generation, but it doesn't get done, and it doesn't get done because my generation doesn't vote. And so we need leadership that understands that generation is going to be able to bring them in so we can help change that electorate so that there is the political capital there so we can actually take this stuff seriously and get these things done. So yes, I support the mill levy. Yes, I support the Mental Health Task Force, and I support doing so much more on the issue.
Thank you. Next, we have Stacy.
Thank you. As a member of the council, I advocated wholeheartedly in support of the recommendations of the Mental Health Task Force. And just to be clear, let's talk about what that means. That means that if we vote to approve it in September, we are going to add 11 plainclothes police officers to our force and develop a behavioral health unit. We will add 3 mental health co-responders so that when our police get called to mental health calls, of which they have about 2,000 a year, we will have 24/7 coverage to send a mental health professional and a police officer out there who is not wearing a uniform to help address that very specific need. Absolutely, it is needed in our community to address mental health more proactively, and the pandemic just made that all the more clear. This is an issue that is really personal to me. A few years ago, my son was at Blue Valley Northwest when mental health issues came to the forefront in high school students. He and his friend formed a mental health board at the high school, and they developed programming and a concert and education and resources for high school kids to improve their mental health situation. He became an ambassador for Zero Reasons Why, which is the district's mental health initiative, and I was really proud to see him do that. It is important to me as his parent, but also as a council member, to really advance the efforts that we make in this city toward mental health. And the recommendations are a strong part of that. The second part of that is, do I support a mill levy increase? I wholeheartedly support funding this effort, and it's important to know that the 1 mill levy increase supports not just this, but additional staff to our police department and to our fire department, and also cybersecurity efforts. But I also support looking deeply to see if there are other sources of funding for those efforts. So if we can identify another source of funding, for example, if there are any relief funds available to go to one-time expenses, I would advocate for that as well to lessen the burden on taxpayers.
Thank you. Next, we have Scott.
I'm also in support of the mental health initiative, and I think it's it's just needed in the city of Overland Park. It's needed everywhere. There's a lot of pressures each and every day in just living from day to day, and COVID was just, well, that's a big part of what it is today. It's always been there. Having a job, having kids, knowing that you got enough gas in your car to make it to work. Not everybody has the ability to just fund everything that you want to do and go on vacations. And a lot of times the pressures of everyday living has to do with and turns into some real mental health issues. I do support the funding for the police department and mental health people, because a lot of the calls that the police go on has to do with mental health. There was one time where my son was actually received a Silver Medal of Valor for this, where he was shot at by a person who pinned him up against a closet under fire, and he was able to talk him out. And with the negotiators that were called on scene. And that tells me that, yes, people that have mental health issues can put everybody at risk. I think that I wish there was a way to fund it, and I hope that there is a way to fund it other than a mill levy. But we do need this, and it needs to be funded, and we need to find a way to make that happen.
Thank you. We'll move on to our second question, and we will start with Stacy. What changes, if any, would you like to see in the city's proposed budget for 2022?
There are many things that I would love for our city budget to be able to fund. So many different directions I think the city can go in that will be worthwhile. If you are familiar with our forward OP visioning process, that sets forth what we want to do in this city going forward, and all of those initiatives are worthwhile. Specifically, I would love to see additional funding for some sustainability efforts to make the city respond better to climate change. I'd love to see us address that. I would love to see us put some additional money in the budget to address varied and affordable housing choices. We have so many things that we can do in the city that I think the budget could address. But it's important to know also that Overland Park operates on a property tax that is half or less of any of our neighboring cities in Johnson County, and that for years we have run very efficiently and very productively on that budget. The budget process is long, it's very public, it's very transparent, and I feel like the way we are spending the taxpayer dollars in the budget coming up for 2022 is exactly right. It adds resources to things people care about, to public safety, to city services, to city parks, and spends that money carefully. But as we look forward, I think there are opportunities for us to figure out where we want to go as a city and how we want to fund that. and I hope to do that for the next 4 years.
Next, we have Scott.
Well, I think the budget process for 2022 actually has already been decided, and it's basically over, 200 pages, I think. And I think that the budget itself is something that we need to have input with. The public needs to have some input. It needs to not just be presented when it's done, but we need to have some type of say in that. We need to have meetings and inform the public. I think our communication needs to be better as it reflects on the budget. I think that there's a lot of things in the budget that is based on what we're currently doing, things like chip seal and things like that, and we need to find an alternative. We need to listen to the people that are out there and giving us ideas, and we need to incorporate that in the budget up and coming. The other thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we have a good city plan. We need to make sure that we follow that city plan. We need to make sure that we don't renege on some of the promises that we make when it comes to the city plan, where we're changing things and offering variances, et cetera, to not only businesses, but other entities that is different than the city plan, just so that we might make a few extra dollars, in my opinion. So yes, I think the budget is pretty substantial, and I think that the city has done a fairly decent job with the budget, but we need to have input.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Ty.
Yeah, so as far as the current city budget, I do not have any specific issues with the current city budget. But let me say that with this caveat that I don't have any specific issues with the city budget based on the political realities we're living in today. I think the city today is doing a good job of that first part of my mission. I said I want to run to connect the success the city's had over the last 20 years to what we still need to accomplish in the next 20. Today, we're doing a great job of protecting what makes our city great today. We're not necessarily doing that great of a job of building to what's going to land us on these best of lists in the future. Stacy mentioned Forward OP. And what Forward OP does a great job of is setting bold, ambitious goals for our future. What it doesn't necessarily do such a great job of is building that bridge of how we get to the political reality of today to the political reality we're going to need to actually accomplish some of these big, bold, ambitious goals. So an example that I'll use is climate change. We want to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Gigantic goal. Where we're at today, what we can accomplish today is LED lights and street lamps. Great first step, but we got a long way to go. So again, it comes down to how do we create that reality where we can actually accomplish some of these things. And it does not happen without being able to bring a new generation into local government. So again, that's where I think we need leadership that's able to protect the interests of the people who are already participating today. First and foremost, we can never lose sight of that. But we have to have leadership that is focused on and devoted to bringing in a new generation who supports these things overwhelmingly. And that's when we'll start to see actual change on the issues and not just great talking points.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question, and we will start with Scott. What role, if any, do you believe the city should play in economic development to bring jobs and capital investment to the community?
Well, I think the city council needs to work with the Chamber of Commerce, and we need to try to attract businesses, because if we can attract businesses, we bring employees. If we can then put in affordable housing, and I'm not just talking apartments. To me, affordable housing is having a housing tract where the prices aren't $300,000 for a house sitting on 3/4 of an acre. That all needs to be part of the city plan. It needs to be planned out, and then we need to follow that plan. I do believe that Overland Park is a great place to live, work, and play. And I think we need to capitalize on that. And when I say that we need to make the city better, I'm not saying that it's bad. Too many people think that when you say better, that means bad, and that's not it. The city of Overland Park, I've raised my family here, and I have to tell you that I'm very pleased with Overland Park, but it can be better. And I think that the city council, along with the Chamber of Commerce, can work together to bring businesses. We need to things like Blue Hawk, I support. While I don't necessarily support giving them the tax incentives that they receive, I do support the fact that they're here and they wanted to move to Overland Park. And quite honestly, we want people to want to move here. We want them to know that it's a good place to live, work, and play, and we shouldn't have to pay for that.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Ty.
All right, so this is on economic development, bringing jobs and businesses. And so when we're asked this kind of a question, traditionally what we're talking about is tax incentives. And I have a real problem with how a lot of politicians use tax incentives. It's often used to deceive, often used to try and mislead people to make them emotional about a topic. So I want to start with tax incentives and explain where I stand on tax incentives to begin with. I view tax incentives as a tool. In a city like Overland Park, they should be a rarely used tool. The reality in Overland Park is that we have a highly educated workforce. We have a high net worth resident base, and that makes us attractive to local businesses. They want to be here, and we don't need to give away taxpayer money to get them here in most cases. Let me tell you where I would use tax incentives. I would use tax incentives in a couple situations. Number one, if the project would not get done without the use of public money. Number two, I would use tax incentives when it would not get done without. I would use tax incentives if and only if the project brought more value to our residents than what it costs us. And I'd use tax incentives for strategic purposes, industries that are going to help land us on those lists of best places to live in the future. So when we talk about the important things in our city's future, sustainability, things like that, I think I would be willing to use the incentives there. But in the bigger picture, we need to recognize that business issues are very individualized. So we need business leaders who have a diverse set of experiences to be able to help those businesses. So let me briefly tell you mine. I was educated, I got my MBA from Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. I've done consulting jobs in various different industries, from media to medical to advertising and marketing. And then I've also have professional experience working in supply chain, working in planning, project management, and sales management. So all these things will help me help businesses in these individualized issues on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Stacy.
Thank you. I think the city has a leading role to play in economic development. It must, of course, partner with all of the various entities around the community that make this work. So the Chamber of Commerce is an obvious one. We have the Economic Development Council that the city partners with the Chamber on that helps attract business to our community. But we also need to partner with business interests, with residents, with everybody to understand the way this dynamic plays out. I served on the board and the executive committee of the Chamber of Commerce, so I know a little bit about what it takes to attract businesses to Overland Park. And it is true that we have an amazing city, and businesses do want to come to Overland Park. But they want to come to Overland Park and the ifs are if we have the right kind of space for them to move into, if we have the employees that they're going to need, and that means the kind of education the employees need, if the employees want to live in Overland Park, do we have the right kind of amenities and attractions to draw people here? Are our commute times on our highways low enough that it's an attractive place for people to live, right? All of those things have to be in place. It doesn't just happen. It requires a partnership within the community, and it requires sometimes a public investment. Sometimes that investment occurs to bring entertainment venues, sometimes to bring office space. You don't always need to offer an incentive or a public investment. It should be considered carefully and judiciously, but sometimes that is needed to create the kind of community that brings businesses and jobs and keeps our schools high quality and brings housing. All of those things tie into each other and work together.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question, and we will start with Ty. What do you believe are the greatest challenges the city faces over the next 10 years, and how would you address them?
All right. So first off, it gets back to what I've kind of been mentioning throughout the night. So sorry if I sound like a broken record here, but there are serious concrete issues that we need to take seriously for our future. So I view our future. I want to see us become regional leaders on the treatment of mental health. I want to see us become regional leaders in sustainability. And I want to see us take diversity and inclusion measures seriously. But again, these all require us to build that bridge and connect the political realities of today to how we get there. And that's the overarching problem that we're continuing to run into as we have these discussions. And it's that low participation rate. We have a low participation rate in city government in general, but we have an especially low participation rate amongst the groups that these issues are wildly popular with. To give you an idea on this, in our city elections, we have about 50% more voters over the age of 70 than we have under the age of 40. And what I see when I hear that is that's just not sustainable. We cannot continue relying on one generation to do all the work to lead us into this future that we want for ourselves. We need my generation to step up and be a part of the solution. And if we can get them involved, we can actually see some progress on this. And so what I want to be is a local leader who's going to actually try to reach these people. Number one, I don't think that that's happening today. There's not enough efforts being made to expand our voter base. But we also need to have leadership that recognizes the reality of why these people aren't participating. It's not because they don't want to. It's often because they don't have a chance to lay down the roots that so many other generations have had a chance to lay down in our city. So because of housing and unaffordability, so many of my generation haven't been able to move. They haven't been able to become lifetime Overland Park residents. So they don't have those connections. They don't have those roots. And if we don't have leadership that's trying to usher them into the process that actually cares about getting them involved, then they're never going to get involved. And I think that's the biggest challenge is if that generation never gets involved, we can never accomplish the things we want to accomplish.
Thank you. Stacy.
Well, the biggest challenges facing the city immediately are addressing our aging infrastructure, right? We are a city that is now over 60 years old and all of the infrastructure is aging, and we are actively working on that as a council now with the Infrastructure Advisory Group. We also need to work on varied and affordable housing choices. We've talked about that. We have a process coming up next year to plan our master land use plan for the entire city, and the public needs to be involved in helping us decide what this city looks like going forward. But in terms of our challenges, I want to talk specifically about one that's become really evident to me over the past year serving on the council. And that is the way that we listen to our residents and the way that we address their concerns. I have gone to great lengths to communicate with constituents during the pandemic. I've talked to hundreds of them or met with them on their streets or in park shelters to hear about their concerns and to try and help them. And that is one reason I wanted to be on the city council in the first place, is to help them. But I hear them when I hear that they're worried about how we're spending money and how we're planning. My husband and I bought our first house in Overland Park on the corner of 119th and Quivira. Our house backed up to an empty lot. And we were incredibly disappointed to hear that a developer wanted to come in and put an apartment complex there. So we spent months working with the developer, the city staff, or our homeowners association to try and either change that development or make it look and feel as best as it could for our neighborhood. And I think to a degree we succeeded. That taught me a lot about concerns of residents and how you navigate through the system. I have helped with that in the past year, and I know I could keep on helping with it. And I think it's a challenge for anybody who serves on the council.
Thank you. Scott.
I think there's a lot of challenges coming up in the next 10 years, and one of them is whether or not the city council or the government of Overland Park actually listens to the residents that put them there. As I look at the different hot topics that are out there right now, I'm looking at a city plan that, and I agree that the city plan is something that coming up next year needs to be well thought out for sure. But we need to follow the city plan. And that's where the problem and the breakdown is, that we tend to not follow that city plan. If I invested all my time and dollars in a house, the last thing I'd want them to do is build a gymnasium behind it, where when I'm looking out my back deck, all I see is a 4-story brick building. When I see things like the toll road, that is something that, we can talk about later, but a very simple fix to that in the city plan that would eliminate all the problems with the toll road to begin with is just put it on the ballot and let the residents tell us exactly what they feel and how they feel about the toll road. That was a simple thing that could be done. Instead, 1,250 surveys were sent out, and I know I didn't get one. No one asked me. But I will tell you that these are the types of things that we can fix, and is one of our biggest challenges in the next 10 years is listening. We also have a challenge with safety, public safety. We also have a challenge with infrastructure for sure. And this is something that we need to do. The street lights, part of the reason why that they wanted to remove the street lights down off 91st Street was because, they wanted to put in a walking trail and they didn't want to move the box at the price of a box or to fix aging streetlights. This is something that's going to happen across the city. It needs to be planned for. It needs to be looked at down the road.
Thank you. We'll start with Stacy for the next question. Do you believe the current city manager form of government we have is appropriate for Overland Park, or would you favor a strong mayor form of government?
I favor a strong city manager form of government, which is what we have now. And so what that means for those who don't understand that is that we are professionally run by a city manager who oversees the staff and makes key decisions about them. And then the council, the way I say it is the council sort of serves like an advisory board or a board of directors for that city manager. That means that we attract and retain highly talented professional staff across the board. And it means we are run consistently throughout the years, no matter who's elected to office, as mayor or on the council. If you move to a strong mayor form of government, you lose that consistency, you lose the stability. And I fear that if we did that and had the mayor somehow overseeing, more decisions about staff and being more involved, then you really create an instability among the staff, lessen the likelihood that you're going to attract the best talent in the country to come to your city and work. I think it's working very well. It has worked very well for the past 60 years, and we should keep the same form of government.
Thank you. Scott, same question.
I believe that the current way that we're doing it right now is really probably one of the best ways, if not the best way. I think the mayor is, he's a politician, and I think the city should be run by a professional management group, and our city staff is second to none. Our city staff are very diligent in what they do, and they present to the council and to the mayor different opportunities to solve problems. And I think that form of government is the way it should be. We should be there to advise and to listen to the staff, and these are things that we can do. I wouldn't have it any other way. I would not want a mayor that is going to make decisions based on the way they want things to be done when it typically is managed professionally by those that while they're involved, they're not politically involved. And we all know that when it comes to the politics, everybody has their own ideas and everybody has their own values when it comes to politics. I think we have a city staff that is second to none, and I think we need to continue that.
Thank you. Ty.
Yeah, so I am fine with the current city manager status today. I think it's served us well as we have gotten to this point in our history and where we're at today. I think it has attracted a tremendously talented city staff that's been able to execute on a long-term vision that the city's had. And I think too often that gets overlooked. I think politicians want to take credit for these things. And in reality, it's the people behind the scenes that are working hard. So all credit to them. I think the current system has served us well. It's allowed them to execute on that long-term vision. And it's allowed stability and structure. That's not to say it's always going to be the best form of government for our city. I think, just as businesses needs evolve over time, our city could be in a position where that's no longer the case as we build to that future and what we're going to need into that future. But today, I think it serves us really well.
Thank you. We will go on to the next question, and we will start with Scott. What specific proposals do you have to support the goal of providing access to affordable housing throughout the city?
Well, again, and it almost sounds redundant, but I think a good city plan is extremely important for affordable housing. A lot of times when people talk about affordable housing, they look at apartments, maybe townhomes, things like that. I live in an apartment, so I know apartment living. I moved there to take care of my granddaughter after I sold my house in Olathe 5 years ago. And I will tell you, I have good neighbors. There's some really good people that I live next to that are in our apartment complex, and the crime level is very low. But I also wouldn't want to have an apartment complex put up behind my house that I just spent $750,000 on. Or I wouldn't want to have them put it up there so that it would destroy my property values because of the perception, which really isn't always the reality. Affordable housing is in the eye of the beholder. I think good affordable housing is something that maybe we put something on smaller lots. The prices are cheap. Maybe there's other ideas out there. There's several communities across the country that actually fund their police officers and their firefighters. They fund part of their down payment in order to move into the city to make it affordable. There's a lot of good ideas out there to bring people that may not be making three figures to move into the city of Overland Park. And I think we as a council can help with that. We can look for new ideas and we can make that happen, but it needs to be planned for. The thing that's going on with Deer Creek, where they're currently they're talking about putting apartments over the clubhouse and redoing that. These are people that we made a contract with as a city, that they're gonna have like homes around like homes. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to live up to our word as a council, as a city government. We need to live up to that and make sure that they're not harmed as we're looking forward.
Thank you. Ty?
Yeah, so affordable housing is an issue that every politician running for every office in Overland Park and anywhere else is going to claim that they support. And there's a good reason for that. It gives an excellent quote for politicians to say that we need affordable housing so that our underpaid public servants like teachers, firefighters, police officers can actually afford to live in our city. But there's a difference between delivering a good political quote and delivering results. So first off, we need to address the reality. And the reality is that land is often prohibitively expensive in Overland Park. And it's that way because people and businesses want to be here. So when land is expensive to acquire, when land is expensive to develop, that goes into the prices that developers charge for rent, because businesses exist to make a profit, and no candidate running for city council or any other office is going to change that business reality. So we have to be realistic about that, and we have to be creative in that reality. So I think specifically we need to look at all options. That includes smaller housing like we've seen from the Veterans Community Project. It includes accessory dwelling units, senior living facilities, duplexes, townhomes, those kinds of things. But I think in a bigger picture, we need to treat this like the transparency and accountability issue that it is. Again, this is something every candidate running for every office is gonna claim that they value. Well, if that's truly the case, we should all be eager to own this issue. So let's treat it like you would in a business. Let's define the issue, let's measure the issue, and let's hold our leadership accountable for delivering results on that issue. So that's what I support, is actually defining what we consider affordable housing. Where are we at today? Where do we want to be in 1, 2, 5 years? And then we're going to release that data publicly and hold our leaders accountable so that they can actually deliver results for the things that we're all claiming to value.
All right, Stacy?
Thank you. I think it's a great idea to plan out what we're going to do and then be accountable for it. So let me tell you what we've done along those lines. So first of all, we've had presentations from United Community Services about their housing plan for varied and affordable housing. They've given us a roadmap for what they think cities and counties and communities should do to make this a reality. So we're already looking at that as a city council, and the Forward OP Board of Directors has already identified this as one of our top priority areas, and we're already working on it. As a city council member, I have voted for, so far, 3 renovations of long-term hotels into more affordable apartments. So these are going to be studio and 1-bedroom apartments that are at a lower price point than some of the other apartment complexes around town. I've also actively supported a new project out at 175th and Plum. That's going to be rental homes, 3-bedroom rental homes that are going to be in a subdivision that has some amenities, like a walking trail, like access to retail. Those are going to come at a lower rental point than some of our other houses in the area. We also have started to do some creative infill development in the north part of the city. So that's like a multiplex that takes over a small lot around 87th Street that houses multiple people next to single-family home neighborhoods, but blends into that neighborhood. It looks like row houses and townhomes at around 80th and Metcalf that also come at a lower price point but fit into the neighborhood. So there are all of these ideas that are already underway, and I'm really proud of what we have done. But there's so much more to do. We've defined the problem and we've laid out a plan. So what else are we going to do? We need to look at more infill development and multiplexes. We do need to look at accessory dwelling units. We need to look at providing a housing trust fund so that people can rehabilitate older homes in North Overland Park and stay in those homes and make those homes successful. And we also need to partner with our development community. I've talked to those developers. They don't just want to build big single-family homes out south. They want to get creative, but they need help in doing it. And we're going to have to sit down with them and talk about how to do that, how to incentivize them to build multi-use residential, communities that don't just look like big apartments, but function for everybody who lives in Overland Park.
Thank you. We will move on to our next question. And we have Ty starting with that question. Since its founding in 1960, Overland Park leaders have had a long history of visionary planning. What do you believe the city should do today to ensure the city's prosperity for the next 60 years?
Next 60. All right. Well, that exceeds the scope of my cute campaign catchphrase of connecting the success of the last 20 years to what we need to accomplish in the next 20. But, that is at a high level what my campaign's about. So Overland Park is a great place to live today for all the reasons we've already talked about. It's why we land on these best places to live in America. And so again, we have to protect what keeps us safe today, or what's landing us on those lists today. So our safety, our business relationships, and our infrastructure. But we also need to recognize that over the next 60 years, what's landing us on those lists today are not going to be the same issues that are landing us on those lists tomorrow. So we need to aggressively pursue those things I've already mentioned, becoming a regional leader on the issues of sustainability and the treatment of mental health, taking diversity and inclusion seriously. And once again, to accomplish those, we have to bring in a new generation. So I think we have to have leadership that recognizes that this might be a different city than the one that they grew up in and the one that their grandparents grew up in, because of those realities that people can't build roots here. And so we can't move forward as a city just by ignoring those issues, by closing our eyes and hoping they go away. We have to actively address that. Otherwise, we're going to have an entire generation that does not get involved, and it's going to continue to accumulate as they have kids that aren't able to build roots in this city because they're moving to Kansas City when they're 20 and 30 years old and coming here for the schools and the yards like so many are today. So we need leaders who will aggressively pursue that generation, leaders who will acknowledge the problem that they do not have roots here today, and we have to get them involved in the process. We have to have leadership that understands them, understands how to communicate with them, and that's how we're going to ensure prosperity over the next 60 years and accomplish these big goals that we have.
Thank you. Stacy.
So let's start with the basics in terms of what we need to do for the next 60 years, which is to keep what is working going strong. So number one concern of anybody who lives in the city is public safety. We put a lot of resources behind our police and our fire, and they serve us very well. That absolutely has to be something that continues in the future. The second is that people value city services. So that means things like plowing our roads and maintaining our sidewalks and clearing away storm debris. All of those things that Overland Park has done really well for 60 years, we need to keep that strong. The next thing they love is amenities, right? The parks, the pools, Deanna Rose, Shields Soccer, the Arboretum. All of those things are things that we absolutely need to keep growing and making stronger for people that live here and for people that visit here. And then they also want us to keep jobs coming in. They want us to keep schools of a very high quality, and our neighborhood strong and our community feeling the way it does. So how do they want us to do that? Well, we don't have to guess, because for 3 years we have sat down with hundreds of people from all over Overland Park and developed this vision for the future that is Forward OP. And if you read it, you'll see exactly what Overland Park wants us to do, and that's where leaders need to take us. So a lot of that is around how we connect with each other, how we gather. Do we have enough gathering spaces and places for the city to get together? Are we innovating? Are we looking at all those efforts of sustainability and bikeable and walkable communities that people want to live in, that young people want to come and live in? Are we working that way? And finally, a sense of what's called placemaking, right? Does Overland Park have its own identity as Overland Park? It is a place that we are really proud to live in, and a place that visitors want to come and visit us, and a place where companies want to bring their jobs to, and help us keep it as strong as it has been for the last 60 years.
Thank you. Scott.
Well, I think I won't be here in the next 60 years. I think that would put me way old, but I won't be around to see the final result. But I think Overland Park has a great base, to work from. And I can't tell you, how much I appreciate that. I am proud to have raised my family once I left Las Vegas in 1989 to raise my family here. But I can tell you that there's a lot of challenges that are going to come up when in the next 60 years. One was COVID. And when the COVID challenge come up, and while we say we support our police departments, when the president of the Fraternal Order of Police, my son Mike Moser, tried to get in front of the council and talk to him, the statement was made by one of the councilmen, well, you know, they were just asking for maybe some benefits, for a little extra help financially because of what they're faced with. They needed some sanitizer for the department. And one of the councilmen said, well, the police knew the danger when they got hired, and so we don't owe them anything. When that happened, that's what kicked my campaign on. Because yes, we say we take care of our public servants, but we don't. We need to do a better job. The starting pay for Overland Park used to be one of the best in the metro area, and now it's no longer. We're having a hard time attracting police officers and firefighters to Overland Park. We're understaffed. We need to make that a priority because we can't, work and play and as a family without good public safety. So that needs to be first and foremost, that we need to take care of those. We need to offer them training. We need to do the things that we need to do to make them the best in the nation where people want to come. The other thing is, someone asked me once, do I ever go to Westport? I said, why would I go to Westport? I live in Overland Park. There's restaurants here, there's places to go, there's amenities here. And that's my vision for the next 60 years, is that you should never have to leave Overland Park to go somewhere. You're here already.
Thank you. We will move to our next question, and we'll start with Stacy. Do you believe the city of Overland Park is heading in the right direction?
Well, Overland Park has been moving in the right direction for its entire history. And that is why we are where we are today. If you go to the Overland Park website, you will see an entire page devoted to the awards that we have won. Best place to raise a family, best city to live in the country. My husband and I were knocking doors for the campaign, and we talked to these two gentlemen, and I always ask, do you have any issues with the city? Do you have any concerns? And these guys both said, why would we? We live in paradise. I mean, that's literally what they said. Now, I know that we don't live in paradise, and there are many things that we can do to improve Overland Park, but it gives you a sense of how people feel about Overland Park when we have a 95% satisfaction rating on our last survey, that we have been moving in the right direction. But we are at a pivotal time in our city's history. We're going to have a new mayor for the first time in a long time. And we have a lot of decisions to make about our future. So the question is, can we keep moving in the right direction, and what direction is that? And so we're going to have to pay attention to issues like, how do we develop? What kinds of development do we bring to our city, and how do we fund it? How do we take care of our aging infrastructure, and how do we fund those things? All of those are really critical and important decisions that this council will have to face as we go forward in the next few years. So Overland Park has moved in the right direction, and with help, we'll continue to move and build an even stronger future.
Thank you. Scott?
I think Overland Park's moving in the right direction and has been. I think that just like with any ship that's sailing the seas, I think there needs to be little corrections along the way to point us in the right direction. And I think that Overland Park is a great place to live. Everybody tells us. I don't hear the same things when I'm knocking on doors in Ward 4. What I hear questions about the infrastructure. I hear questions about the tax giveaways. I hear those types of questions. But yet it is true. They live in a bubble, and they'll say that, yes, we're happy with where we live and what's going on. If we have an aging infrastructure, as we do, we need to fix it. And if it doesn't get any better, if we do things like chip seal, which only lasts probably on an average of 2 to maybe 3 years, depending if it's single or double chip seal, then we're going to spend money to come back and redo it again. And therefore, the problem starts all over again. We, as a city council, need to look at the long-term plan and plan for that, so that just like sometimes we have money issues and we have issues that face us, we as a city council need to eliminate those from the public. The other thing we need to do is we need to improve communication with everybody out there. And we hear all the time, well, I talked to the people that voted for me. I've never been talked to. And I can tell you, one of the things that I'm going to do is I will spend one day a month or more, if the appointments fill up, well, I'll take a Saturday and literally sit down, make appointments with people that want to come in and talk to me and cover the things that are of interest to them to see how I can help them. The other thing that I will continue to do is give them my cell phone number. And I get a lot of calls and I get a lot of emails lately because I've given out my email address as well of questions that people want answered. So let's fix the communication. Let's work on the infrastructure. And I think that's just a little tweak to put Overland Park in the right direction.
Thank you. Ty?
Yeah, so I do think there's a lot that Overland Park is doing right now. It's again why I choose to live here, why I choose to raise my son here, and why, God willing, I'll be raising multiple kids in this city. But the key here is that in determining whether we're heading in the right direction, we will not be heading in the right direction in 10 years if we're spending all of our time patting ourselves on the back for the work we've already done, for the things we've already accomplished, and the list we've already landed ourselves on. So there are a couple things that we need to do. I think we need to acknowledge today's reality and not just close our eyes and hope it goes away. We need to raise expectations for local leadership. So what does that mean? That means things like transparency and being transparent at all times, not just when we're asking for people's votes. It means taking accountability seriously at all times. That is why, like Scott, I also give out my cell phone number, 785-418-1165 for anyone watching on the broadcast here, because I want to be accountable to our residents at all times. And it's about putting in the work. I mean, I'm amazed how many people who are regular voters truly don't know what city council does. They ask me these questions when we're knocking doors, and that's why I answer questions from as detailed as what we're digging into tonight, and as simple as putting out Facebook videos to explain to folks, what does city council actually do? What do you spend money on in a local election? What does the city spend money on? It's about putting in that work to educate our residents. It's why I'm committed to having town halls if elected. It's why I believe I'm the only candidate who is committed to putting out regular newsletters to help educate our residents on what's going on in the city, because we deserve that. We deserve these high deliverables from our elected leaders, and we should raise our expectations for what we expect out of them.
Thank you. We're going to go to our last question. We're going to start with Scott. And each person will have 1 minute to answer, and then we'll move on to our 2-minute closing statements. So Scott, last question. Do you believe the City of Overland Park City Council is responsive to the needs of the community? What is your approach to governance?
Well, obviously, from my earlier comments, I don't think the city council has been acting responsibly to the community. I think that too often, I mean, just the open meeting wasn't even instilled until this year. And yes, you could talk to them if you jump through a bunch of hoops. That shouldn't be that way. One of the things that I think we need to do, and I agree with transparency, of course, but I think we need to open up the lines of communication where everybody gets a voice, and that we not only just hear them, but we listen to them, and then we take action based on what their input is. And I think if we did that, I think a lot of the problems and things that the residents are faced with right now would probably go by the wayside, because they will feel valued like they should be, and they will know that their city council reacts to what they want.
All right, next we'll go to Ty.
So the question, do I think the city is responsive to our residents? Yes, if you're a corporation. Yes, if you donate to political campaigns or are a regular voter, maybe. But the reality is, if you're not one of those things, you've probably never heard from them. Most people in our city can't tell you who the mayor is. We've been out knocking doors since March. Most people can't tell us, and these are regular voters, can't tell us who our elected leaders are in the city. So that tells us a lot. And it also tells us a lot as we look into what we're claiming for transparency and accountability. We're not transparent just because we post live streams of city council meetings online. We're not accountable just because we have public forums now. What that tells me is that we're really we're only interested in serving one certain type of resident, the types who can make it to city council meetings or can muster up the time to watch 2-hour city council meetings online. So that gets into my approach to governance, and it's about my approach to governance is about being representative to all our residents, not just some of us. And I think that's the difference that we see today.
Stacy.
Thank you. I'm going to take this question in two parts. So are we responsive to the needs of the community? In very basic and fundamental ways, we are incredibly responsive, right? If the number one concern of our residents is public safety, we provide high quality first responders in spades. And I've been on the Public Safety Committee for over a year and have voted in favor of every additional resource that they have asked for. I think we do that really well. I think we provide excellent city services. I'm also serving on the Public Works Committee and have voted in favor of all the additional resources that our Public Works team needs in order to do its job well. I think many Overland Park residents would say that they take that for granted. It's been that way always because we do it so well. But the second part of this is, are we responsive to the concerns that people are raising with us as we campaign and as I've served over the past year? We have done some really good things in the past couple of years that I think are a step in the right direction. We've opened up the meetings for public comment. That's important. We've started to live stream meetings, and I think we should live stream all of them, committee meetings and everything, so people can attend them live or they can watch the recordings later. Council members, including myself, meet with people all the time. I have solved so many problems. I have changed my votes based on the way residents react to me and tell me what they're thinking. It's a very interactive relationship between the council and city residents. So I feel good about my responsiveness over the past year. I know I'm continuing to do that in the role today. And we'll just keep on doing. We can always improve and we'll do it better in the future.
Thank you. We'll go to the 2-minute closing statement and we'll start with Ty.
All right. Well, thank you, Reagan. Thank you to the chamber. Thank you to the folks here, and thank you to the folks who are watching online. I think it is a great thing that you all are putting in the work to make sure that you're making an educated decision when it comes to vote in August and when it comes time to vote in November. And I think it's a great thing that the chamber provides opportunities like this to hear from the candidates. If y'all are committed to be here, if y'all are committed to watching online, you deserve leadership that's going to be just as committed to work hard to get in front of you, to work hard to meet you halfway there, and to do it at all times and not just when we're asking for your votes. Leadership is about a whole lot more than pointing out the problems. It's about proposing solutions, building that bridge like we've talked about all night on how we actually get there. I think there are too many current leaders who think that we're transparent because we live stream, who think we're accountable because we have City Hall public comments. But that's just not the reality that so many young families in our city are dealing with. So many people do not have time to watch 2-hour city council meetings just to see politicians bicker. They want to actually know what's going on in their city without having to put in that time. So they deserve leadership that's going to put in the work to make sure that they're getting in front of the residents instead of making our residents work hard to get in front of them. So that's why, again, I am committed to holding regular town halls. That's why, again, I am committed to putting out newsletters to help educate our voters on what's going on, to continue putting out educational videos on my Facebook page to help people understand what's going on without having to sit through that 2-hour meeting. And why I will do that at all times and not just when I'm asking for your vote. And it's why I give out my cell phone number. Again, 785-418-1165. Call me, text me when it's convenient for you, because I understand people do not work around my schedule, around city council schedule. So if you support that message, I hope you'll go online. My website is tyforop.com. I hope you'll call or text me. I hope to earn your vote on August 3rd or before early voting starts this Saturday. So please get out and vote.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Stacy.
Well, thank you for having us. It has been my privilege to represent Ward 4 for over a year. City council is a big job. Meetings are rarely 2 hours. They're most often far more than that. And there are hundreds of pages of documents to read and understand, and people to talk to before you even walk in the city council meeting or the committee meetings that you have to attend. Over the past year, it has been truly my pleasure to work on problems that include a neighborhood fence dispute with the city that I was successfully able to negotiate to a resolution for them. To go and meet with people who are concerned that the crosswalks need to be strengthened in their neighborhoods because stormwater drainage is running through their backyard and they don't know what to do about it. I've worked on that. I have looked at so many different street surfaces and curbs that are torn up and need addressing, and I've gotten Public Works to come out and help with that. I've addressed safety issues concerning people speeding in front of public schools and had the traffic safety unit come out and do that. During this campaign, I was incredibly privileged to hear a concern from a resident who felt like the police were not responsive to her as a person of color, and she had fear around that, and for her grandson who has autism. And I was able to connect that family up with 4 members of our police department to really engage in interactive community policing that went a long way to addressing that resident's concerns. I love doing that stuff. That is why I joined the council, because I love talking to people in my ward and trying to help them make life better. And on a bigger scale, I love thinking about this city and what it's meant to me and what we can do with it for my kids and for my parents going forward. So thank you for allowing me to represent you for the past year. It would be my privilege to do it again for 4 more years.
Thank you. Scott?
Well, I have to tell you that I'm different from the other 2 candidates, as this will be my full-time job. I am ready to retire from what I'm doing now, and this will become my full-time job. So all the many papers and everything that needs to be read will be read. I will hold the forums that we need to hold in order to get the input from the public that put me there, from my constituency. I will address the infrastructure. I will address the issues that they have every day that I can actually do something about. And I think that Stacy and Ty are good people, and they're going to do the same. I will tell you that my donations come from individuals. I accept no corporate donations. Everything that I've accepted for my campaign is from the individual. I believe in public support of the public safety wholeheartedly, that if we have a good public safety division, we have a good police department and fire department, EMT service, that this city will rise above and we will draw people in because it's a great place to be. And no one can ask my family on whether or not we believe in transparency. My son, who took and filmed his own death, we released it to the public. Why did we do that? We released it to the public to show what good public servants we have on the Overland Park Police Department. That no matter what you do and how, as a police officer, you're courteous, you're kind, you're caring, you show empathy, that bad things can still happen. We need to continue that type of mentality within our department here, and we will continue that as city council. They will get the things they need in order to take care of us. This is why I'm running, because I believe that safety is the first thing that needs to happen in Overland Park.
Thank you. And I'd just like to conclude by thanking everybody who is in attendance today and watching online. And I'd especially like to thank our candidates for their attendance and participation in today's forum. We appreciate your time and willingness to serve the community. A recording of this event will be posted on our voter education website at votejoco.com within the next 48 hours. Finally, we encourage everyone to learn about the candidates and vote. Advanced voting in person does begin this Saturday, July 24th, and polls will be open Election Day, Tuesday, August 3rd from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thank you for joining us this evening and have a great night.